Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you follow us from, wherever you watch us from. My name is Ebrima Sonko. I am the host of the Dialectic Space Podcast. And with me today are my very good brothers, whom I've had the pleasure of knowing for many years now, in the persons of Muhammed Lamin Dibba and Mustapha Sonko. And today, our topic of conversation on the podcast would be migration, especially as it has emerged as a topical issue again in our national discourse, but not only in our national discourse, but also globally. So today, these two individuals have a keen interest in this area. They've studied it and they continue to work in that area of specialization. And for that matter, I would like to welcome both of you to the Dialectic Space podcast. How are you both doing today?
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. I'm fine, thank you. Living in a very cold and very dark season right now.
Where are you joining us from, Diba?
I'm joining you all the way from Switzerland, Frick, in the municipality of Aargau.
Awesome. Mustafa?
Eh,
Hey, thank you so much, Ibrahim. This is Mustapha Sonko, currently in Cardiff in Gambia at the Gambia National Youth Council. It's a sunny afternoon here. Very it's not cold at that.
Thank you, both of you. Let me just say that I know these two individuals. I think it would be fair to say that we've all of us worked at some point in our university career, in our university journey together at the University of the Gambia while um, we were all undergoing our undergraduate studies before Diba moved away to further studies abroad. He's a Badibunka, so he's a top guy living abroad now. And then Sonko, who is also my big brother, we have the same last name. Also had also went abroad for studies, and he just returned to the Gambia not long ago, and now working within the realm of immigration in the Gambia. So these are serious individuals that I've had the pleasure of knowing, and since starting this platform, my goal has always been how do we drive important conversations on burning issues, on national issues with people that have very nuanced and sophisticated understanding of those areas, and they can help us, really break down the different things that are happening. What are the myths? What are the misconceptions? What are the real issues that are related to the particular subjects that we're interested in? So today we are going to begin from the top. Really, I want my guests to get into introducing themselves to our audience, um, and for our people to know who really they are, where they're from in the Gambia, and why they choose this line of work in relation to migration. I will begin with Mustafa Sonko, please.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I am Mustafa. I hail from Farava, Kayindi district. I completed my master's at University, where I pursued international migration and ethnic relations with education and citizenship. I also have a bachelor degree in English and political science. Experience I worked with the National Council as a migration officer. Also, I used to work as an intern at Caritas Gambia, where my work focused on migration, integration, and raising of awareness. Back in the UTG, I was the Secretary General of the 17th Executive Council of the Union. So briefly, this is Mustapha Sonko. I work on migration, and then my research focus on reintegration in the Gambia, and then so many topic related to migration policy and then governance. For now, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Diba.
Well, thank you very much, Mustafa. Ibrahim, actually, for inviting me alongside my colleague Mustafa on the dialectical space. Sending warm greetings to our viewers and listeners, to wherever they might be. Yeah, as you may know, my name's Muhammed Lamin Dibba. Actually, I'm called Junior because I have shared the same name with my dad, basically. So I was born in Farafenye, but brought up in Bundung, basically. So I've completed my bachelor's degree at the University of the Gambia, bachelor's degree, of course, in political science, where my undergrad thesis focused on involuntary immobility and its consequences on youth unemployment in the Gambia. So basically, I have over 10 years span of experiences across working with civil society organizations, central government, both at the legislature and the executive, as well as international organizations. So my migration journey actually was inspired, with all credits to Dr. Ismail Assise, actually, who suggested that actually I should write a thesis looking at young people who are at home, are willing to migrate. That is, they have the aspiration to go, but they do not have the means to do so. So from that day, my interest in migration sparked. So, and I was fortunate to intern with International Organization for Migration in the Gambia, and also did consultancies for the Department of Labor, actually, where I look at social protection systems, nexus to providing integration assistance for returnees, especially irregular migrant returnees. So then I migrated to Switzerland to pursue higher education at the prestigious Geneva Graduate Institute, basically where my master's is in international and development studies in the specialization of mobilities, migration, and borders. Well, in Switzerland, I completed an applied research project with the Global Protection Cluster, hosted by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, where I co-developed advocacy tools and mechanisms to support forcibly displaced populations in Myanmar, Mozambique, Nigeria, and Niger, impacting millions of people. That is to say, providing global guidance on humanitarian issues. And most recently, actually, I was engaged by Frontliners Associates in Boston in the United States of America, as well as the Geneva Graduate Institute to model AI policy negotiation in humanitarian context to support international organizations. It's a very difficult task to introduce myself, actually, but in the legacy back then, we used to say, we believe in a mantra that you have to say I am for people to say you are. Basically, not to brag, but obviously to be conspicuous in certain professional benchmark, even where impossible, Mustafa and Ibrahim. Basically, this is why I am.
Thank you both very, very much for really telling us who you are and very brief part of what your journey really entails. So I'm really excited to talk to both of you. And today our conversation would principally at least try to focus on irregular part of migration. Migration is not very linear, right? There's various aspects of migration, and migration has forever been here since time immemorial. Human beings, by our very nature, loves to move around for various reasons. And today I have the individuals to talk to us why that is the case. So we're going to try to have the conversation specifically on irregular migration, or what otherwise a lot of Africans would call, youths engaging or undertaking the backward journey, because that conversation has emerged in our context again. We've seen numbers of people that are taking the boats, and reports of Gambians dying in some of these journeys, not only Gambians, but also other nationals as well. So I thought it is timely to bring people who really understand what's happening, what are the trends, what are the misconceptions, but what are also the policies and legal frameworks that deal with the issue of migration currently, especially irregular migration. So, Diba, thousands of migrants die attempting to reach Europe by sea every year. We know this, particularly on the Atlantic route to the Canary Islands with the Mediterranean Sea, for example. In the early 2024 alone, Diba, can you hear us? Well, Mustafa is still with us. So I was just saying, in the early 2024 alone, nearly 5,000 migrants deaths were recorded on the Atlantic route to the Canary Island. And also globally, 9,000 migrants died crossing borders in 2024, with many particularly engaging in the irregular migration sort of track. My question really is that what do the latest data tell us about how many Gambians are departing, engaging in irregular migration, and how many of them are reported to have died or missing in some of these journeys?
Thank you so much, Ibrahim, for that question. So, first of all, I think we need to be a little bit clear with the India has very little data when it comes to the number of people that live this irregular route. This irregular migration in the Gambia is not by any state actors, people that normally go are smuggled. And then many a times smugglers in a very clandestine manner is actually a discrete network where data availability is very difficult, even though at the borders we have the MIDAS there that is controlled by the Gambia Immigration Department. So migrants themselves don't actually tell us this is where they are going to. But with the statistic that is actually available, even the area to actually track. But what we can get from the data that we normally get online, that is actually saturated, tells you that between 2017 2018, it has actually increased in the tens of thousands, and the number of deaths is also in the thousands. It's difficult to give a round figure. This is because most of these immigrants that normally leave the Gambia, many a time don't carry out any document. But of the dead, it is in the thousands. Just recently, we've seen that in this year, it has actually gone down because of interception. But all we can say in terms of entries, the numbers are actually people putting it around 5,000, 12,000 with regard to the interception that are done by the Libyan Coast Guard in Algeria and then Mauritania. And the numbers that you normally get in the Gambia are returnees that actually come through the borders. And Gambia has saturated borders and for now.
Thank you, Mustafa. You keep it's difficult. Usually, I think you're in the middle of your conversations. It's hard to hear you for some reason. So maybe we should try if you have your headphones and we try that one more time. But I'm gonna shift to Muhammed Lamin Dibba real quick. Dibba, why do you think it's so impossible to track accurately sort of the accurate number of people who are engaging in these journeys? Why is it difficult to have accurate data in respect to this?
Well, thank you very much, Ibrahim. I think that's a very important question. Regarding tracking deaths and disappearances, or tracking irregular migration in general becomes very difficult as a result, because the migration is irregular, number one, and secondly, is invisible. Thirdly, most of those who migrated are not registered. So therefore, it's very difficult for us to identify them. And even though looking at the procedures of the migration, you must have a national document. But sometimes it's difficult to understand who is actually taking the irregular migration journey unless and until they are found on the spot of the journey. And secondly, looking at the high seas of the Mediterranean and the Sahara Desert, actually, we also seeing that when boats capsize, yeah, right. So there is normally no formal procedure wherein people are able to be identified or formal witnesses to be able to ascertain the number of people that were disappeared on that or that died along the way. So therefore, it's very difficult to track this data. And secondly, there is what we call lapses in terms of coordination among states or countries, where migrants usually have their transits or in fact at the point of departure, because they don't have a data sharing network. And so therefore it's very difficult, one, to intercept. Secondly, it is also very difficult to trace those who disappeared, and also as well to identify who actually is exactly taking the irregular migration route. So therefore, finding data about irregular migration is becoming increasingly difficult from the get-go.
Another important subject is most actions, as important as migration or irregular migration as it is mostly influenced or informed by certain factors. And I'm curious to know what do you think are some of the social and economic conditions that pushes young people to take this journey?
Well, it's this is how would I put this? Well, it's a common knowledge actually, because looking at the economic conditions, we blame it on employment and underemployment. Because most of the young people, looking at the Gambia, we have a population of 2.5 to 2.6 million people, and out of the population, we have about 53.6% of young people out of 70%, according to the Gambia Bureau of Statistics. So you realize that 41.5% of young people are unemployed. And those who are in fact employed are not paid on the value of their labor. So as a result, this pushed them to the irregular migration journey, because they believe that Europe is the only solution. So we also look at low wages, right? We also look at low wages, because when people are employed and do not have sufficient amount of money that keeps them in a dignified life, obviously it will push them to migrate. right? And looking at the social factor, we have what we call family pressure, right? For example, today, Ndebama Tata Marcito, sorry, Sangadula Wala Kulidula driving, a very beautiful car, like your mom or somebody's else mom, Tata Sangadula, Masiram for the other price. I mean, so that pressure, you see that as a young man, you'll be willing, to sacrifice all what you have, your life, to the irregular migration route, just to make sure that you make your family and mother proud, just to make sure that they also live in a dignified life, right? Another social pressure is that myself, and I'm a typical example of that. I believe that I believe that the kind of education I want at some point does not exist in the Gambia. So I have to migrate to Switzerland to seek for that kind of education I want so that I can be respected in my society and also live a dignified life. But also we have environmental factors that leads to migration actually. Um, Countries like the Gambia do not have smart agriculture and green jobs that also lead young people to push to come to Europe to work. So this could be clearly linked to the Spanish migration deal where young people were recruited to come and work in the farms in Europe actually. So these are one of the reasons why people undertake this irregular migration route.
Now let's dive down a little bit more to the backward journey, right? And
Mhm.
we know it's very popular. It's perhaps one of the most popular things within young people back home. And I always say that I don't blame them. Like we know it's not even a secret. Gambia is tough. Most African countries are tough. Access to jobs, to live in a dignified way, having a job that rewards you for your labor, like you said. All of these things are impossible in the Gambia, and so I don't blame people for wanting better things for themselves to help themselves and their family, and you articulated that very well. Now, Mustafa, welcome back. So, Mustafa. Can you hear us, Mustafa? Mustafa, can you hear me? Well, Mustafa is still experiencing some difficulty. But Diba, if you would kindly walk us through what is involved in the backway journey, including the risk and some of the things that we hear, whether in fact the reality in terms of like people being kidnapped and asking for ransoms and boats capsizing. What does the journey look like for people who are engaging in it?
Well, this is true. Whatever you heard from the social media or from the mass media, for the most cases regarding human rights violations of migration across the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean Sea is true, right? But before delving into the traditional method of irregular migration from the 80s towards the 90s and early 2000s, but most recently we have seen that 7 days, right? From different departure points in the Gambia, from Bakau to Gunjur to Jinak in the Nyomis, etc. People just take the boat, and it took them seven days to arrive in the source of Spanish Canary Island. But the traditional route, where it used to be from Gambia through Senegal, Mali, Guinea-Bissau, and Guinea-Conakry, and then Niger, which is one of the hot transit points for migrants, then to the the other parts of Africa, that's the northern part of Africa, that is Morocco, Tunisia, and Libya. So these countries actually are those countries that the Europeans externalize their borders to. These African countries are those countries that Europeans externalize their borders to push back migrants. That leads to devastating consequences. So I remember doing an investigation on Euro-Mediterranean partnerships in Geneva, actually, where I was one prison in Libya called Kararim, where most of the African migrants, particularly Gambians, are detained. All right. So this is one of the constraints, one of the major challenges immigrants face. They are being detained in prisons for doing nothing, and their only crime is they just want to
No,
travel
right. I
and
Sophia
then
de.
live a better life. And they have been tortured and extorted, beaten mercilessly. Some died, some disappeared, and their families do not get to see them anymore, which is very sad. So for women, for the most part, they face sexual harassments. Some never, get to live a dignified life anymore in their lives. And then if at some point you refuse to be intimidated, I mean, you are killed. So most of the worst case scenarios that people are beaten to death, people are killed, people are being extorted, even as where some people in fact will pay their money just to cross the Mediterranean Sea or the Sahara Desert using smugglers. But even at the end of the day, smugglers itself will turn out to method human rights violations against them. And this has been documented, well documented by international organizations, and Europeans know this actually, but yet still they desire to externalize their borders. But I'll give you context, right? If you look at the global migration figure, we have about 3 million people who live outside their habitual countries of residence, according to International Organization for Migration and the World Bank. Only 3% of the world population lives outside their country. That represents the 3 million people. So which means people are migrating across different regions, segregated regions and countries, not only necessarily in Europe. So where is the false narrative of the mass exodus of people? People are. So just to give you another historical perspective, in 1508, there was slavery in Africa, right? And then we abolished slavery. But before we abolished slavery, Western comes to Europe using the same irregular migration route across the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean Sea, to come into Europe to discover a new horizon, right? And they took our people and sell them into bonded slaves or some kind of forced labor. So in 1508, we said, no, we cannot continue with this, we abolish it. And they introduced what we called colonialism. So we fought hard. The first crops of African leaders in the 1960s emancipated us from the yokes of colonialism. And now we started the liberation movement. At that time, in fact, most of the European countries to Africa and Africa to Europe is visa free. You only need a passport to travel. So when they knew that now Africans are very skilled, intelligent, and they could actually do most of the jobs they do that the Europeans do, what they do is that they introduced what we call the so-called globalization in the 1980s. And that was meant to ensure globalization. We have free movement of people, goods, and services without punitive visa regimes or restrictions, right? Excuse me. Without punitive visa regimes or
That's
restrictions.
your boy.
Yeah, without punitive visa regimes or restrictions. So unfortunately, within the process of globalization, they now started to categorize us into as the first world, the second world, and the third world, right? Now, people who are moving, just because they're moving, they want prosperity and safety. Now you try to categorize us and profile us. That is why I strongly stood in Vienna and against that. That is not only a geographical expression. They are trying to tell us that we are lesser of a human being and we do not deserve to live in a dignified life. So therefore, that is why we need to decolonize migration, right? Another false narrative is that most of the migrations occurred from Europe to Africa. This is far from the truth, Ibrahima. Only 1.5% of Africans migrated to Europe. If you calculate the whole statistics, and two-thirds of the African population migration occurs within Africa with itself.
But Diba, to that point, before you continue, though, I think what makes this so grave and such a global issue is
Mhm.
such that because of the number of people that continue to die in the Mediterranean, I think
Mhm.
in modern times, modern contemporary times, I think that's also more reason why there has been a much more attention to that issue, just because of how the number of young Africans that continue to die in these journeys. I think it perhaps make a very strong case to say that that is perhaps incomparable to any other area recently that we've seen, especially the last decade or so, in terms of young people that continue to die. Do you think that's a fair assessment to say the reason there is so much attention in this part of the world is simply because young people continue to die endlessly just in the Mediterranean Sea? That's why there is, an unprecedented attention on the issue of irregular migration in the African continent.
Well, I'll give you context again.
Okay.
For the past 30 years, Europe itself have experienced major migration and refugee crisis. I'll give you one in the context of the Balkan Wars in the 1990s. That's recent, right? 30 years ago, in
Yeah.
1990s, where 1.1 million people, for those who may not know, the Balkan region is the southeastern Europe,
Mm-hmm.
migrated to the Western Europe in a span of 8 years. In 2021, 2022, Ukrainian crisis, over 2.6 million Ukrainians. Ukraine is in Eastern Europe.
Yes.
Some of them use the back way to enter into the Western countries within a span of 5 months, just to seek for protection and opportunity. You look at the so-called 2015-2016 migration crisis. We have over 2.6 million people also migrated.
Yeah, but they are not entering boats and their
No,
boats being
no,
capsized.
listen,
My point is, yes,
irregular migration is not only about boats, Ibrahim. That's what you have to
no,
understand,
no, I do understand that
right?
bit. My
So
point
what I'm
is,
trying to tell you, yeah,
no, my
what I, what
point
I'm,
is, yes.
mhm.
No, I
what I'm
just
trying
want
to
to.
tell you is
Okay, go ahead.
they don't only use, yes, most of, yeah, you could you they you they use boats as well, because some of
I
them come
know.
through the sea, right?
Yes.
Some of them come through the sea. But I'm trying to tell you that, if you look at the migration crisis, right, they just painted a negative image of the Gambia, oh sorry, of African people, right? Normally, how many of us migrated within the African region using the Sahara Desert, crossing to Libya, to Tunisia, just for businesses, commerce, and trade? There have never been problems, especially during colonial, even in contemporary modern era. When Gaddafi was coming to the Gambia, he came by sea, crossing the Sahara Desert using the Mediterranean. Even though it could be argued that it has high security details. But so long as you have a valid passport or a legal document, you have the right to migrate within the African source. The only problem that we had is that these young people want to cross the Mediterranean Sea, right? And crossing the Mediterranean Sea, in fact, shouldn't be a crime, because, listen, the Global Compact for Safe and Orderly Migration in 2018 clearly said it. Every migrant have the right to be respected, regardless of, your migratory, regardless of the route you use to migrate.
Yes.
And Article 13 of the United Nations also guaranteed the right to migration in a safe and orderly manner. So for me, I did not see crossing the Mediterranean as
Illegal.
dangerous,
Yes.
or irregular. Do you understand? But the manner in which it is done, right? So what these Europeans do is, let me tell you one thing: the Europeans are part of the general politics in this, because they knew that when they externalize their borders, how do they externalize their borders? Well, to third countries like Libya, Egypt, Tunisia. In fact, I'm very angry at President Kais of Tunisia, who have been, in fact, those who are given the UNHCR card as the refugees. In fact, those are the very one he will torture and push them back to their countries of origin, because the European unions have given him a lot of money, you know. So therefore, he mortgaged his pride and the sovereignty of his country to the EU. Just Frontex just came in at a later part. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Mhm.
So the Europeans are not just interested in securing their border. What they are interested in deterrence, to push us back, because they feel that we are a threat or a burden to their social protection systems, as well as threat to their jobs, and then they see us as criminals, and which we are not. You understand? So it's
Yeah.
the whole concept of the Western media framing irregular migration. In fact, you know, punctuating migration as irregular. But in actual sense, it is not. Everybody has the right to. That is what is the essence of the SDGs then. So that is
I
the
I
essence of
I,
it.
I think I
Please.
just have to. eh, Yeah,
Yeah. No, Mustafa.
thank you
Mustafa, you
so
can.
much, Diba. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
It's okay. You can jump
Yeah,
in,
continue.
Yeah,
Mustafa.
I
Please.
I
Yes.
just wanted to disagree. Yeah, I just wanted to disagree with my colleague a little bit with regard to irregular migration. I know he's looking at this from a Pan-African lens to actually describe the patterns of irregular migration. Irregular is actually irregular. What irregular is actually regular, and this is defined by international laws, is defined by our policies. Taking the sea, the high seas, does not make a migrant irregular.
Mhm.
Using a flight to fly to US does not make you irregular. The means of transportation does not make you irregular. What makes you an irregular migrant is the process in which you involve in, whether you left the country of destination, the country of transit, the country of origin. These are the things that you put together. For example, if I leave this country regularly and then I can travel as far as Mali, Guinea Conakry, as far as I have my ECOWAS identity, I am a regular migrant. But the moment I leave and then probably travel to South Africa required me to have a visa or whatsoever. If I don't have that one, I am an irregular. Let's say, for example, the people that went to United States of America through Nicaragua or Mexico, they went by flight, but their status is irregular because probably they don't have visa to go to America. You went to Turkey as a transit on a transit visa, but you stayed in Turkey. That makes you an irregular migrant. You can start your journey irregularly, end it irregularly, or even change your status. So the thing that Dibba is pounding to say, if you use the high C, he does not consider migration does not, in terms of regularity, legality, is not rest on the opinion of one man alone. There are borders. If you enter the Gambia without proper documentation, you are considered irregular immigrant, and then the Gambian authorities have the right to actually send you away. He quoted the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. Safe, orderly, regular, but he should have talked about regular. What makes migration irregular? You don't barge into people's country. People have their own laws, and the moment you enter there without observing their laws, you become an irregular migrant. I understand he's coming from an activist point of view, but when we are discussing migration matters, if it is blue, it's actually blue. I understand, and I agree with him, the role of Frontex in the entire politics, because European Union policies are not driven by evidence-based, but they are driven by political will of the people in Germany, in the US. It's not actually there is migration crisis. For me, I consider it as a so-called migration crisis. Just 3.6% of the entire world is immigrant. Therefore, that does not equate to a migration crisis, or to put a crisis or a picture to say that we have too many immigrants in the world. The same nonsense is actually propounded in the Gambia, where we believe that we have a lot of foreigners in this country. 2024 census has told us that we have just 5% of the foreigners in this country. So, but just to bring you back, I understand Frontex has actually externalized its borders, and this is why we see a lot of return. European Union policies have actually shifted, and the policies shift because we have anti-immigrant politicians, populists, who campaign on lower immigration, stricter immigration, strict borders, return. This is what they are proposing, and this is why we believe that Europe is hard here and there. No. Politicians' policies are not driven by evidence-based policies, but based on politics of their people. That's what I want to tell to my brother.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let Dibba to chime in real quick to sort of, if he would like to react. But I just would like to say, I think what all of us can agree on is the fact that, there is a Eurocentric view to this and the politicization of it as well, in terms of just what we know is a global trend in terms of immigration, not just in Europe, but also in America. The idea of countries just stoking fears about people that are not members of their country, but not only like citizens of their country, people who look a certain way. There is almost a systemic intention, a systemic idea of keeping those people completely out of those countries for one reason or the other. So it's not unique to only Africa. So what is happening in Europe is a global phenomenon that we continue to see in various parts of the world, where people that look like you and I, that's just the reality. We have all these fancy ways of calling it. It's not what that is. It is the idea that they want to seclude the rest of us, either skilled or unskilled. It don't matter. So long, I think, we don't look a certain way, we're not included in that part of what they call the global north. But Dibba, really, I want to bring you on quickly if you want to react, because I'm sure you're itching to really talk to Mustafa, and then I'll have Mustafa again to talk about in terms of what does the numbers look like in terms of the people that continue to die in this journey from, let's say, the past decade or something. But Dibba, yes, if you want to react to
Yes,
Mustafa,
so I think he misconstrued me, or he did not understand my earlier my earlier sentiments. What I was saying, like, I was looking at it from the perspective of history, right? Trying to connect it to now. Obviously, once you violate your terms of visa, you are considered as an irregular migrant regardless of where you are, right? Or once you decided to defect in your countries of transit. We understood that. That is clear, right? So what I meant is, like, the means of transportation, that is about mobility. But of course, there are legal instruments. So what I'm trying to say is migration rules are not flexible for those of us coming from, sub-Saharan Africa and other and Eastern Asian countries, right? And then that is as a result of how we portray ourselves to the Western world. So that is the whole point of my argument, actually. Their laws are their laws, their institutions are their institutions. I mean, it's up to them how they dwell with that. But obviously, what is imperative is that my point is that African governments also should be responsible to that based on reciprocity. But generally, of course, in my honest view, like I said, the so-called globalization should be a free movement of people, without any punitive visa restrictions. So therefore, consider migration as irregular. From the general point of view, for me, it doesn't literally make sense. This whole concept of irregular migration was adduced by the Western powers, notably Africa, and notably America and European countries. So for me, it doesn't make sense. All right.
We'll move. Mustafa Sonko, you work in the migration sector in the Gambia, so you have at least, I believe, a very good understanding of what's happening on the ground. Recently, a lot of young people are taking the journey again. We've also seen young people dying again, from the reports that we see on social media. Why do you think there's an emerging trend? I'm sure it hasn't stopped, but I'm also aware that there are times in our history where it sort of peaked. Like people were going, every young person in those days really want to travel outside the Gambia, if not through the airplanes, you want to take the backway journey. I know family members who went, I know friends who died in that journey. All of us know people who at least have died in that journey. But why do you think it's happening again when we know for a fact that European countries are having strict, much more strict borders? They are making it completely impossible or near impossible for people to enter into their countries. There's more security in the high seas or in the Mediterranean seas, for example, and people are still dying. Why do you think is the case? And if you would briefly dilate on the number of people that we know so far for the past decade or some that have died in this journey.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim, and thank you so much, Diba. Uh, there are three things that we need to understand, like the European intervention, because currently the European Union is actually very much interested in return and reintegration, and this does not solve the long root causes of irregular migration. Their campaign is actually hinged on three things. I read Dr. Umar of Brussels University, where he was trying to check the politicization of migration. And then he pointed out three things that stand out for me. The reason why the entire European campaign is failing is hinged on three things. Number one, irregular migration is very dangerous. Stay at home. Number two, Gambia has a lot of opportunities. You can stay at home and make it in the Gambia. Three, don't come to Europe because Europe is difficult. All these three have, number one, many of the Gambians that you tell irregular migration is very dangerous, you sensitize them. They actually know one or two people who die. Some of them witnessed the journey, they came back and they are willing to go. So therefore telling them that irregular migration is dangerous, they already understood. Number two, the campaign is actually hinged on telling the Gambians you have a lot of opportunities in the Gambia. And there are opportunities, but they are not enough. The labor force survey, looking at it roughly, 43 to 45% of the country are either out of job or they are not employed. The last one is stay in the Gambia. Europe is not easy. Gambians know that Europe is not easy, but many of them are of the view that no matter how difficult Europe is, it cannot be compared to the Gambia. So these are the problems. Now you unpack this. One of the reasons why irregular migration is also in the increase is the policies that the European Union actually said there will come back to home. Because I would not want to agree with them, but like many a time we complain that European Union should do this. I know European Union should be blamed right now. Number one of the policies that they have is the issue of return, the border externalization. And this does not solve the long-time root causes of irregular migration. Instead of preventing irregular migration in the Gambia, what the European Union does is externalize their borders through Frontex, give some money to Algerian government, Algerian Coast Guard, Moroccan Coast Guard, Libyan Coast Guard, to deter people from entering Europe. That's number one. But when these people come back again, they will use another way. They will use the Canary Island, go to Spain. Now, the use of social media has made this has raised the irregular migration in the Gambia. It is now very popular because the young people call it 7 days. We've seen influencers, TikTokers, and then when you think that this is a joke, it's not actually a joke. Somebody leave this country 7 days and he is in Spain. Okay, he has made it in Spain. That is a discussion for another day. But this sends a picture that a lot of young people in the Gambia want to live. One of the reasons why this is going up is the fact that a lot of Gambians believe that migration is a rite of passage. When they look at Dibba, Dibba has very red lips. They look at Ibrahim. Ibrahim is at the gym. These are the realities that actually occur to them. You think that it is a joke. It is not actually a joke. Ibrahim is building. Mustafa is back. When I wanted to come back, I received messages and I understand the point that these people are actually trying to complain. Why are you coming back to the Gambia? They've seen it is not easy here. And that's the reality. That is the unfiltered conversation. Another reason, when we go to our masjids, I live in the village. In the masjid, the imam on top of the pulpit will be saying alanga dua na tamalali. So mon min bi jeng e kam telephone they don't exist. Kabin tata nung gunjum fan, the guy was telling me like ni ko alanga dua tamalali e kala Allahumma sallu bele kawta ni ko nga dua jankoli re ko munu le moy. So that little thing Camille Foten camera is normal. It's actually not normal. This is forcing a lot of young people to leave. They are seeing what Dibba is sending here. Mustafa is here. Mustafa be dunna gele gele kono jang. Dibba nata jang. Even though Dibba will come with few pounds during Christmas, Dibba will be driving limousine. These young people need something. They've seen the impact, and most of the things on social media are issues that are actually mind-blowing. You live in this country, sometimes you want to get frustrated. That will bring us to this one. I just want to wind it down when people say, no, people leave because of unemployment. That is one of the reasons. Dibba will like to tell you that, for me, I want to look at migration in theories. This is why the new economics of migration will tell you that people don't leave because they don't have job, but because migration is seen as a household decision where the entire family contributes so that you leave. The other part of it is a neoclassical economy of labor migration that tells you that, man, wage differential. When you are working there, the amount of money you get there is far more than what you get here. As a migration officer, I can be in Sweden and I will be doing delivery. That many pay more than the money that I am here. So it is nothing about, okay, people don't have job. If that's the case, why do you think that the former, there was a by-election in Banjul half there? The councillor, he's paid, he's a government civil servant. He went to Brussels and he absconded. What does that tell you? He has a job, but because of the neoclassical economics theory telling you that I get more money when I am there. And then the other one is dual labor theory, where you realize that in America, in Switzerland, and Sweden, where I was, you have a lot of jobs, low-paying jobs that the Europeans are not willing to. So the Gambians here will therefore move to the what Dibba called the so-called global north. They will move in there because there is high labor job there. But don't worry, all these policies that America is setting, the European Union is setting, is going to backfire because they have an aging population. And as I told you again, most of their policies are not driven based by evidence-based policies, but they are driven based on political sentiment that they use in terms of their politics. You have the populist, you have the anti-immigrant sentiments in Sweden, in Germany, and then even in your land, in USA. When the Republican came, everything changed. So these are the things that explain why a lot of young people are leaving. And for me, who goes to the field, a lot of young people will tell me, boy, can you move from Tolanga? But honey, back faji, we will move. But what we tell them is the loss of even a single soul is regrettable. And as an officer in the National Youth Council, our job is advocacy. And then there is no person in the Gambia who will say, we don't know the dangers of irregular migrant. But these are just structural problems. The young people need jobs. The young people need good life. They see people driving limousines, and they believe that they cannot make it here, even though going to Europe alone does not guarantee you success.
So, from what I'm getting from Mustapha Dibba, it's not so much about just having a job by the name of it and being paid a certain amount of money. It's about a job that will perhaps make you live in a dignified life in your country. And that's not unique to Gambia. Now, some parts of Africa you go to, people don't travel like that. If you trace the number of people that travel from certain parts of the African countries, it's incomparable. Like, say, Nigeria, for example, that is a hugely populated country. And the amount of people that leave the country is so high. You look at Gambia, that is also very small. Like you said, 2.5 million, 2.6 million. A lot of Gambians leave the Gambia. A lot of Gambians engage in illegal migration, right? And you go to certain countries like South Africa. Here you meet South Africans, for example, in the United States. I don't know about Europe, but you don't meet a lot of them, right? And you meet other people from other African countries, and that tells you about the story. It's not that South Africa do not have problems, but I think a lot of people that live in those countries have jobs that they're able to live on. Now, you cannot tell me that's the same for everybody in the Gambia. That's tough, right? So to Mustafa's point, it's not so much about the job, but it's about a job that helps you to live a meaningful and sustainable life. It's a job that helps you to earn a decent living. It's a job that you'll be able to take care of yourself, to alleviate yourself out of poverty. But if that's not the case, people are always going to leave to bridge that wage differential that Mustafa talked about very briefly. But Dibba, I want us to spend some time a little bit on another important thing that Mustafa talked about in the Gambian context. Niman Tama, you and I, we went through this, all of us went through this. And even if Itama Dafana, right? Even if you not make it, there is an already understanding that this person is already successful because you live in the borders of some European country somewhere. You're not respected, you are dejected. If you're back home, if you Imambula play no to go abroad, there is always that sense of non-belonging that you go through. I want you to talk very briefly. Why do you think that is the case? Why do you think that to only make it, there is a perception that people need to leave the Gambia? Because that is not, in fact, the reality. Yes, Gambians abroad, or Africans abroad, do incredibly well for their families. In fact, we contribute nearly 40% to our economy annually. Remittances is a huge part of what makes up Gambian economy. But still, there are Gambians who are making it back home. Why do you think that is the case? That people who don't have that opportunity are subjected to these inhuman treatments by our own
Ebrima,
people?
I've addressed this well before Paragon came. I think I said when people are not paid on the value of their labor, actually, it's what that pushes them to migrate. That comes about employment and the wages they received. So I am personally indifferent to the neoclassical theory of migration, because that theory basically look at wage differences and employment. And it suggests that individuals have the time, the freedom of choice, and of course the resources to migrate, actually. So it also suggests that basically migration is only about economic reasons, alienating certain factors such as political, environment, and social. Political in the sense that wars and conflicts lead to displacements and migration, right? Social because of family expectations, and environment because of climate-induced migrations. So there comes, he talks about new economic labor theory of migration, actually, which demystified neoclassical theory of migration, because migration is not only about individual decision, but it's about a collective household or family decisions, right? So this have been tackled before. Unless you want me to expand on it again, then we
No, no,
could
I
go
just
into it.
no, I wanted you to talk briefly about the perception of people making it abroad. Why
Well, that is
do
why. Well, when it comes to perception, that is why we have a lot of young people in the Gambia, actually, we call involuntary immigrants, right? They aspire to migrate and they do not have the ability to do so. So that aspiration is actually formed by a genuine intention, because they have seen people who lived in abroad, and then they're doing amazingly well, living in a decent and a sustainable life, basically. So this is normally influenced by family networks, peer influence, and social media, as posited by Paragon, actually. Well, when I see Ebrima in Seattle in the gym, lifting heavy weights, looking back in the Gambia, he cannot even afford to go to the gym. Obviously, I'll
uh,
be like, yeah, I want
this
to be
is
like
true?
him, right?
This is
Yeah,
true.
exactly. When Paragon was at the University of Malmo, he was privileged to travel across Europe, particularly in Denmark, to go and make presentations. University of the Gambia could not even offer him an opportunity to make presentations in MDI. You understand? So these are things that in fact motivate people and wanting to travel. I give you a typical example. When my mother goes to Sangadula, Wala Kulidula, with her driver basically, and somebody else's mother go to Sangadula, barefooted, let me call it that way, right? Literally. I mean, they will just sit around to my mother, greet
Mhm.
her well, and then treat her nicely, because I don't want to babudule. Akakuru kia nang. On the other hand, it memo funding you're back home, even though you're trying, living within your means to satisfy your mother. Society did not see it that way. Alga dua tamalale, banko be
Ah,
tamalale bulu. These are small things that
yeah.
inspire people to migrate. So there's no way that you can talk to young people for them to understand. For me, if I see people coming to Switzerland to study, I was telling my brother the other day, I feel I sympathize them, because I knew the kind of life they are coming into, right? It's true, like an Uber job is kind of better than the salary of a councillor, a ward councillor in Banjul have died. That's the honest truth. But then this is about a structural problem. It's about governance issue. It's about lack of social protection programs, that we need to institute as a country to ensure that young people stay and contribute to the economy. So we have to blame partially the government, but also partially so democracy itself in the context of migration is not only about freedom of speech or freedom of expression, but when people are able to live a dignified life, have a job, not wanting to risk their life through the Mediterranean Sea, and then wanting to stay and contribute to the local economy, actually. So I think Paragon did a good job by leaving, all the unnecessary struggles,
Mhm.
actually, and then fighting with the system in Europe, and by coming back home and contribute to the economy. Sometimes, when you come home, after studies or after having an opportunity, you are being stigmatized and discriminated for coming back home. But at some point, staying in Europe actually costs no benefits. Maybe you might have access to internet, maybe to make few calls and so on. And then what actually also is stressful, people begin to question you, when are you coming? When are you coming back home for holiday? That's not only that. I mean, after spending 4 or 5 years in Europe, they started to question,
So yeah.
you understand? So some of these things are really also depressing for migrants, both legal and irregular migrants in Europe, actually. So it's a different next nuances and
Yeah.
nexus, different,
Yeah.
a lot of mixed feelings. So we have to be very mindful how we interrogate these issues.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it is what it is. Yeah.
Sonko, Mustafa, uh, it's one thing to make it to Europe or America, as a lot of us wanted to do, as some of us did. Deba is in Switzerland, I'm in the United States. But what a lot of us don't also talk about, or what a lot of Gambians don't know about, is just how complicated the legal process is to settle. Not only the legal process, but also the social complications in finding these places as your new home. You go through a lot, because getting your papers sorted, finding somewhere to live, the way of life of Western societies, the individualized way of living, among other things, are all issues that migrants continue to face, especially individuals like myself, or those who are involved in irregular migration, that they have to undergo to immerse themselves fully in Western societies, where they're able to have a regular job and some decent living and help their family. Can you spend some time to talk about how that process is for many Gambians who eventually they make it? Because again, like I said, we're focusing a lot on the irregular migration bit. They cross the seas and make it to Europe. How hard it is for Gambians who are within this space to settle in these societies? Songa, are you with me? You're muted, Mustafa. You're muted. You're muted.
Can you repeat the last part of it again? I didn't get that. How hard?
Oh yeah, how hard it is for people to transition.
I wanted you to repeat the last part of the question. You were talking of how hard. My network actually glitches.
Yes, so I don't know if you can get me, but I was just saying, if you would spend some
Yeah,
time. Okay, go ahead.
I think this is a very relevant question. Yeah, I think this is a very relevant question. And many a time when we are discussing irregular migration, we tend to neglect those people who travel through regular channels, and probably they want to change their visa or their status. This is another difficult in terms of reintegration. Like people live here, a lot of them leave this country irregularly. And then you make it to Spain, the entire.
Seems Mustafa is experiencing some internet difficulties. Mustafa is in Gambia, so you all know how that goes. That's tough. But Diba, if you want to chime in real quick before we get Mustafa back.
So well, this is one of the structural problems actually we're talking about, right? Lack of internet. So basically, regularizing your status in Europe is very difficult, depending on how you comes, right? Like the easiest or the fastest way is through family reunification. Either you're brought here by your parents or by your spouse. But like if you have a holiday visa of 3 months, you come and then you overstayed. Well, according to the Western theories, you're considered an irregular migrant. So therefore, it becomes very difficult to have your status valid. Well, in countries like United States of America, you know how it is done, right? For most of the migrants who live there, you don't necessarily need to leave your country. You don't necessarily need to leave the United States of America to your home country to go and wait for your family reunification process. But in countries like Switzerland, Germany, and Sweden, I mean, you are pushed away. I mean, deter for almost 1 year to go and wait because you have already violated the terms of visas. So therefore, it's very, very difficult to settle in Europe. So therefore, it's a myth to say, "Oh, Europe provide easy access to residence permit or quick success for migrants." So therefore, anybody who is willing to migrate to Europe, you have to put this you have to put this into consideration. And secondly, it's very difficult to integrate in Europe. Difficult in the sense that there is different languages in different countries. Like Swedish is different from German, and German is different from Spanish. Spanish is different from French. So therefore, this makes it very complicated for especially English-speaking countries, like the Gambian migrants from the Gambia, to integrate in Europe. So integration is also met sometimes in most cases with discrimination and stigmatization, right? You are discriminated because, I mean, one, if you cannot speak the language, makes it very difficult for you to secure a decent job despite your qualifications, actually. And most of the times, in fact, I experienced that basically in Switzerland. My University of the Gambia political science degree is not even considered when it comes to jobs. So they only focus on my Swiss degree, basically. So therefore, it makes it very, very difficult. And once you are here and your status is not recognized, it's very difficult, in fact, to have access to university education, because no university want to enroll you when you are not a legal resident, right? So it's very difficult for you to. So you are then subjected to menial jobs, and then your human rights are involved. And for me, I think I'm very indifferent to that, because so long as you are a human being, so long as you are a person, you should be considered as a human being first. And secondly, your potentials need to be considered. And thirdly, we have to go on the ethos of the Global Compact, as well as the humanitarian principles, universal declarations of human rights, Article 1 of the United Nations Charter. So which I believe the European countries are strictly violating, as well as the United States of America. So if you are about to migrate to Europe, with a very short stay of visa, put this into considerations and know that you might go for a long ride in terms of getting your status intact.
Okay, let me try to get Mustafa one. Mustafa, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm back. So it's the usual thing, You know what I mean?
Yes, but please, would you talk very briefly about how are European countries, for example, treating African migrants, especially Gambians, that, for example, are on asylum or deportation orders, or just the process of legalizing their status? Because again, like Diba says, if you are an illegal, not illegal, I hate using the term, but if you're an irregular migrants in some, I mean, it's interesting, but that's what it is. These individuals
It
will
is,
sort
yeah,
of,
most definitely.
yeah, but for the purpose of this conversation, I'll use it. If you're an irregular migrant, sometimes it's hard. You can't go to school unless you go to school as an international student, which is extremely expensive, right? And you can't even access jobs. So you're there, you're literally just waiting to get maybe $50 or $100 every month while you wait for some form of asylum consideration that may or may not come at all. So, what is the status of Gambians who are there, or Africans who are, they've made it, they've got into Europe or any European country, they're waiting to hear about the outcome of their case? How are they being treated? Those who are under deportation orders, how are they doing? But most importantly, what is the mental state, the mental health of most of our brothers and sisters who are in some of these detention camps while they wait for the outcome of their cases?
Yeah, so and then So I interacted with young Gambians when I was in Sweden. So I was living in Malmo, and then Malmo is an immigrant city. And then most of the people, when they see you, it's like, for not an embark, you will be like, no, come on, I got a scholarship and I am here. So you don't face the problems. But when people realize that you read migration, they confide in you. I conducted series of interview when I was in Malmo with young Gambians who were in asylum looking forward to asylum. One of the problem you face is racism, and this is the reality. Because when these people were in Malmo and then other people were Krikwansta, they were living in asylum camps. But when the Ukrainian refugees came, this is the time they start treating refugees differently. As a black man in Sweden or European country, they treat Ukrainian refugees or Ukrainian asylum seekers far better than you. They remove you in their houses and take you to other houses. When I went to Stuttgart, I visited a camp where you have young Gambians, Nigerians. All of them are packed in one house, what they call like Loktan Laranding, very small bed, very small corner. Sanitation is actually difficult. But these are the things that you may not see here. And when I spoke to one of them, he told me, to be honest, Mustafa, I'm not but manhani like Nintata, what are the people going to say back home? The perception that people will have that you actually fail. So like that in itself is disturbing a lot of young people. I have interacted. This is evidence-based. I don't know whether I will call it ethnography. I live with people who are seeking asylum, the problems that they are going through. They use gay, it's not working. Lesbian, it's not working. My father is dead here and there. There is war in our place. The Europeans are no more stupid. It's actually very difficult for them. It's not easy to find a job. You do black jobs. If you are caught, you are in trouble. And then the other thing, even people who have permits, it becomes difficult for them. When I was studying migration at Malmo, we treated this article anonymous job application procedure, where this guy with a Muslim name, let's say Ibrahim, you are a good example. Ibrahim, the name Ibrahim is raising a Muslim name. The moment Ibrahim come, Ibrahim is black. Only by Ibrahim's name, Ibrahim applied for like 20 jobs that he is qualified for. None of them call him for interview. But Ibrahim later changes his name and put there Sevensin, probably Sevensin Thomas, and then 3 companies, the same CV. He just erased the name and then called Ibrahim for an interview. But the moment they realized that it is this black man here again, he could not access a job. So we call that racism is actually institutionalized in the job market in EU. That's the reality, whether people want to say it or not. And I am telling you that person is actually educated. He has his document. Not to mention you, an irregular immigrant. You don't have documents. You are caged at one place. Some of the places that they live, they don't even have gas. It's actually very cold. The mentality alone make them sick. I've seen people who think that they molen doku because apply them. So all those ideologies keep pumping into them. Their relatives will call them. They will not even ask after their welfare. A lot of these immigrants, boy Ibrahim Albeje nyari, how is life there? No, ni correct up boy diba, you see this young boy getting frustrated. This is when I came here. I was like, when you have your brothers in Europe, you don't know what they are facing. Call them and check on them. These people are going through a lot. They want to come back home, but the same people in this country will frustrate them. This is why they don't want to come home. And then some of them left because they were given like 40 days. Like Europe is actually different from US, where you will be grabbed at a subway or a station and then you are forced on a plane. No, they give you 40 days when an asylum is rejected. You reapply, you appeal. When it is rejected, they give you 40 days for you to leave. But after that 40 days, they don't actually do any manhunt. You can actually leave Sweden and travel to Denmark, France, and then start another status. But what they don't understand, there is Dublin regulation, when I read one of the stories of the Eritrean migrants who left Italy and then traveled to Sweden because they thought that there are other people who put their fingers and it does not work. Some of them, in fact, burn their fingers. Some of them even believe that they need to cut their fingers. So they go through immense psychological pressure that they will not be able to tell the people back home, because Gambians have that opinion mind. When you tell them that Europe is not easy, easy saying. I wrote articles when I was in Europe about racism, and people were like, if it is not easy, come back home. Why are you telling us? But now I come back home. Even if I should tell them it's not easy, they will be like, boy, you'll have to come more. But what we all say is, it is what it is. It is not easy. It's not meant for the weak. What you think works here don't work there. The Europeans are not stupid. They listen to our stories. They know that the stories don't exist anymore. They know that the stories that we form are cooked stories. So therefore, it becomes difficult. Even irregular migrant to renew your status becomes difficult. Not to mention you enter Europe irregularly without any skills. You don't go to school. Dibba told you don't understand their language. Where are you going to work? When I was there, I was riding bicycles, delivering, walking in the snow. Those are the things that I face. But for me, that is my story. I choose to come back to my country because I believe I'll be able to make changes. But the people who also choose to stay, they have a reason to stay. Because as a migration specialist, I know that everyone has the right to migrate, integrate their build your family. If you want to come back to the Gambia, you come back. If you want to stay, you stay. But let's not put pressure on people who are living in Europe. Ask after their welfare, because they go through a lot. They can send you $50 and you think that is money, but they go through a lot of pressure. Getting asylum is difficult. So this is why they will tell you, man kaito soto. But you don't understand what type of kaito imo soto. No, harjel manchili. It's not about harjel manchili. You have piled a lot of assignment, man. Police will change that. All I know, after like 5 years, police will be changed because they have an aging population. What will change that? But right now, I think migration or communication. Let's just be truthful. Han atra ko mol fambe way lante bulo nga nan kanyum min fodja mol baba ela ci boy kamul bad man abe wuli alla jeno jeman easy, but wonen to nyaati no. That is the reality. We must communicate factual. Ni among easy ni Ibrahima e mol ko ko Ibrahima ko US may easy ba fla no ela ci amandra easy ngaman sene e ma ja bi je fam sañ ba ko di bala lip so jude bebe correctly. It's difficult. But tol min dijanka ya teño kanjan. I understand it. Because when I was at IAM, we are feeling the pain. It doesn't mean that I live in a mansion. I'm struggling just like you. But that will not prevent me from telling you the truth. Why should I play to the gallery and say, no, don't come and the dekabange pain, you so I understand. But the reality there must be communicated. Among easy, but not left kata alta, but coming from more kind of easy. Force it for bro. It's how we save our people. A lot of our young people are getting mad there. Come communicate. Yeah, I'm a researcher. So you know, for more maybe like I come in for America. No, one thing I live the situation in Germany. I saw how the young people are suffering. I saw people who told me, I want to go back home. It's from a fit sort of like I say, because if I follow man make, their aspirations are not met unless and until we have a strong conversation. We know that the government is responsible. They cannot run away from it. They're supposed to provide jobs. But aside that, the young people, we need to have an honest conversation. Diba communicate to people that, boy, Europe is a scam. Now for Moleka, but still now force for it. Force for it. Now, Madi Monaka Dim, for Diki, Fiebo.
Diba,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
just to
Thank you.
compliment
Yes.
Paragon, you know,
Yes.
just to
I know.
compliment him, Yalong Gambia is also marked as a safe place, actually, since the departure of Jammeh in 2017.
Exactly,
Right?
exactly.
So therefore, it's very difficult for a Gambian, for Senegalese, and of course, most of the countries in sub-Saharan African, most of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, citizens, I mean, for them to have their asylums approved. I understand, because Kiloman Trajang, people are not being tortured, people are no longer being disappeared, and so on and so forth. So, like I said, they don't believe in those stories anymore. You understand? And then you cannot also use, I mean, when you in fact say, like in Switzerland, I heard when you even said that you are a gay, now you're seeking for an asylum. They bring a partner for you to sleep with. Actually, just to make sure that you justify your claim that you are a gay. So
I can
therefore,
tell
that makes it
you.
very
I can
difficult.
tell you they will justify it.
Yeah,
Kaito.
exactly.
Kaito.
So yeah, you know, so that makes it increasingly very, very difficult for asylums to be approved. I've known people in Switzerland who have been here for the past 6 years. You know, the asylum in fact processes are not moving. They're just there where they are, and then they also started to um, offer you integration assistance processes, actually in a very limited or small scales. Would you believe it? Like, there are people going through integration phases. They cannot even speak basic national languages of the countries where they are. Switzerland is a classical example. So therefore, it's definitely not easy. And it is called what this irregular migration does, especially for young scholars, is brain drain for the Gambia, but also brain gain. So we have gained Paragon, actually, as one of the most formidable scholars, but probably, as an average scholar, you have lost me to the Gambia, at least for the next 15, 20 years, right? So it's not an easy route to be here. So once you're here, you must be mentally prepared for it. And then people back home are not making it easier for their family members, colleagues, and friends abroad, actually. So that is why sometimes people will go offline for a certain period of time. You will not see them. It's because of certain psychological and emotional traumas they are going through. So there are a lot of hidden secrets that people are not definitely talking about.
Yes. Diba, on this particular issue, before we move to domestically, like what's happening in Gambia in terms of policies and frameworks to deal with the issue of rising migration, I want you to talk about how significant is the agreement that's happening between European Union or European countries and African countries to try to deal with the issue of migration, in a sense, to try to keep Africans in African countries to have access to social services and forms of social protection for people to live meaningful and dignified lives where they're from. How significant are these? Are they working at all, or they're just, again, some, so-called agreements that we just put in place that have no significance whatsoever, because the countries just get these resources. They don't put anything in place to improve the lives of their people, and people continue to leave their countries to try to enter Europe through the backway journey. But is there any meaning to these agreements that European countries have with African countries?
Ibrahim, yes, these policies work to some extent because they are able to provide integration assistance support for some returnees actually, and then the macro enterprises that were established by young people in the Gambia who aspire to migrate actually that enable them to stay and contribute to the local economy. But Niaji Befanang, these policies actually to the wider extent doesn't really solve our structural problems when it comes to migration governance. Like we have the European Union Trust Fund in a lot of African countries. I'll start from Gina Conakry. Right, the European Union Trust Fund basically, because migration issue in general is about governance, right? With the European Union Trust Fund in Guinea, we still experience coup d'etat in Guinea. Mass exodus of young people migrated across the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean seas to seek for opportunities in Europe. We have Burkina Faso to the same. We have Niger to the same. So for me, I mean, these policies actually, yes, they exist, but they are not sufficient enough to solve our intractable challenges. And I think there's high level of corruptions and bureaucracies within the government systems that is deterring the achievement of these policies. Because if you look at Gambia's migration policy from 2018 to 2030, do not adequately tackle irregular migration issues, right? It's just tackle it in peripheries. So that is why we need a strong social protection programs. Social protection programs will help Gambia, I'm telling you, will help us to respond to shocks of irregular migration and climate-induced migration. Because looking at the global statistics, well, before going into global statistics, I look at the National Social Protection Policy. Well, what they do is description. Definitions and descriptions as if they are providing a pamphlet for students to read in high schools, which is a sad case. Because what you should do is, as an institution, like a social protection institution in the Gambia, is to do a needs-based assessment to understand what kind of support would vulnerable young people need. Not only young people, but other constituencies of the population in general. So World Bank profile the Gambia as a fragile country. And if you look at the social protection at the global scale, over 222 million people lack social protection support, according to the World Bank, in 72 countries, and Gambia is not an exception. Now, for this to be effective, we must have a robust data infrastructure, wherein research comes in and so on and so forth, so that we can have social registries and digital identities, which is very important. We have to leverage technology, my brother, if we want to excel as a country. And these are very basic things we must do, right? I mean, not to disrespect the government, but sometimes most of the government, if you look at across government institutions, they don't even have proper email addresses. Most of them use their personal emails for correspondence, relying heavily on Facebook without having a very good website that communicates to the citizens. So therefore, we need a strong data infrastructure, social registries, and digital identities to be able to quickly identify these vulnerable young people so that, they could be, supported, given the support they need. And secondly, we must also ensure inclusion. That is very important, because normally we focused on young people. Yes, even though women are considered as young people, but we have to look at the informal sector workers as well. These are highly marginalized individuals, like the carpenters, the feeders, and so on and so forth. We have so many informal sectors in the Gambia, so we have to deliberately target them. How do we target them? Yes, we have to leverage digital technologies and social registries, national identities, so that we would be able to identify them and provide them support. And this is very important because Uganda was able to do it as well as Rwanda. So they were able to target the most vulnerable populations leveraging technology. And therefore, institutions need to work together as well, because we have institutions that coordinate migration. But when you look at it from a holistic perspective, you realize that there is no effective coordination. The only time they coordinate effectively when IOM instructed them, hey, you know what, we're about to organize a national convergence, or we have a project for you. So I think you need to coordinate together. So because they knew that they were going to have a profit, they're going to benefit from it directly, either financially or other means. So the Ministry of Interior, all names, the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Department of Ministry of Social Welfare and Gender, and their satellite institutions, a Ministry of Youth and Sport, which is cross-cutting, and all their satellite institutions, such as the National Youth Council, National Youth Service Scheme, Department of Immigration. There need to be an interagency coordination to holistically look into migration issues, establish a strong social protection system.
Go ahead, Mustafa.
I just wanted to comment so that Dibba does not run on some lines that I may consider as misinformation, not necessarily disinformation, when he says there should be coordination. When Dibba says there should be coordination, which tells you that probably there is already coordination. How effective, probably that is a debate. But to also, I'll come there later. But he talks about the migration policies. We could actually give it to them. When you read the Gambian national migration policies, I think it's a very fitting policy that addresses all the gaps of inequalities, the need to make sure that we prevent migration, the need to make sure that we minimize the rate at which the people are living in this country. The policy has addressed a lot of gaps in terms of entrepreneurship. And then the other thing that he talks about coordination, there is coordination among the ministries. I don't know whether he is aware of the NCM. I don't know, Dibba, whether you are aware of the NCM.
Yes, I'm aware of it. Mustafa, my point is that, yes, whilst I understand that you work with the
I am
government,
asking
right?
whether you know.
Yes, I know the
No,
government.
no, it's not about I work with the government. It's around.
No,
It's just a
No,
rhetorical
you, so
question. When you say
but
there
you
is
guys,
coordination, this is why
no,
I
but
say,
you guys need to listen to each other. Otherwise, we're going to
yeah,
defeat the purpose for the conversation. So just give each other a chance. I'll let you guys to have a go
yeah,
at it, and then yes, please go ahead, Mustafa.
right, right. What I was just trying to say is, I'm not actually doing this for the government. I'm known for somebody who speak unfiltered. I am just telling you there is coordination. There is what you call the NCM, National Coordinating Mechanism on Migration. He cited the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Interior that heads it. You have the technical working group in all the ministries, technical working group on return and reintegration, border management, smuggling, trafficking, return and reintegration, TVET, and then other things. The National Youth Council will sit on there. I'm just trying to tell Dibba that there is coordination right now, and it does not necessarily mean that the only time people come together is when we go to the IOM calls, we just go and share little things down there. That seems to be, he's just throwing, I don't know, a bayonet, and then I have to just pick it up and say, no, that's not the case. There is coordination where people meet, efforts are there, and then the policy is okay. In terms of implementation, where I have issues is little funding is around, except with the funding from the EU, and that one I agree with him. But when it comes to policies, we have good policies. Implementation is an issue, especially because the EU will actually check certain side of the policy and say, okay, we are focusing on return and reintegration. And the manner in which return and reintegration, I have a question mark on it. My thesis is on the perception of migrant returnees. I have interviewed them and then I've known their perception. But in terms of coordination, there is coordination, and I think a lot need to be done. But it will be unfair for somebody to say there is no coordination. I'm not saying this because I am actually working for the government. I'm saying this because that is what is actually existing.
So Mustafa, before I let Dibba chime in really quick, I just also would like to add that, I think we can all agree that there's a lot of bottlenecks in terms of bureaucracy in Gambian government. And it's one thing for us to have great frameworks to deal with the issue of migration, but it's another thing for that to be really effective. If we're having all of these policies and we're meeting constantly and there's proper communication, channels of communication has been established, but it's not dealing with the root cause of the issue, then it becomes almost non-existent, right? It becomes very, very useless, so to speak, right? So I think to Dibba's point, I think what he's trying to highlight is the fact that there is not much significance or there is not much impact in terms of all these plans or programs that the government is putting in place with all of the other organizations. Dibba, is that a correct assessment?
Yes. Just to come back to policy again,
So I agree with him. Yeah.
From the beginning of the conversation, I said the policy addressed certain aspects of migration. And I think I made that very clear, but it's inadequate in my opinion.
Yes.
Do you understand? Because you cannot just write a policy without having a national consultations. And I think this is very, very important. So that is why I said the policy did not adequately address some of the needs because there is no structural social protection programs and systems, as well as safety nets that address migration issues. And where we feel as a government is that institutions that initiate national conversations for us are actually international organizations, which is a failure to all the NCM, actually. Because if we truly have a national coordination mechanism, actually, there should be always a quarterly meetings, quarterly discussions to see how best we can address migration issues and governance. Just like the way it is done in Western countries in trying to protect, their citizens, but also trying to protect migration discourses. So
You don't think the National Youth Council is doing that?
I'm telling you, I still hold on my opinion that there is not, in fact, an opinion. I mean, there is no coordination. Because if there is a coordination, actually, Well, to talk about, it's just a niceness of English to say, for Paragon to say, because, yeah, that's a coordinating team, but how effective it is. Come on. That is almost non-existent, because if there is a national coordination strictly that focuses on immigration issues, these institutions will work together, quarterly, and then they must make sure that they communicate to the public adequately. And we should not mortgage the sovereignty of our discussions or our problems, in trying to find solace and solutions from international organizations. Well, we used to have UNHCR's mandate in the Gambia, but their mandate expires and they leave. International organizations might leave one day. So when they leave, who initiate national conversations? And now we have our policy. Most of the policies that were written actually were sponsored. In fact, we are co-assisted by international organizations for migration.
Yeah,
and
but
it shouldn't be.
yeah, they have an interest in it. Clearly, they don't want Gambians to go into their country, so that sort of gives them a leverage to dictate by giving us resources.
Our bureaucrats only come together if there is an interest for them. Man, for understanding, because Tubabolko, okay, we don't want you to come to our country. Let me land. Tubabolko, we don't want you to come to our country. So we are going to give you this amount of money so that Aliala will keep. Or you go and draft frameworks and policies that are very nice. And in fact, so sometimes you have to do piloting in addressing these challenges. So we cannot be relying on the EU for support. Imagine there are certain parts that the EU is interested in support. But so other parts may EU more support. What happens to those? What happened to those? So what is the responsibility of this national coordinate? What is the responsibility of these institutions coordinating migration then? It's utterly useless. Let's call a spade a spade. Boy, we have to get to work.
Yeah, Yes, I think Dibba, you get point. So yeah, like I'm not saying there is no coordination. In the end, you say there is no coordination at all. And I want to bring you there. Imagine like you were saying, like European Union sponsors certain aspect of it. Because for me, my speech is grounded with facts. I am not actually telling you like a decade at an. I'm telling you that EU is mostly very much interested in return and reintegration. And you can actually take that to the bank. And then when you say there is no coordination,
I agree with that 100%.
Exactly. It's because in the mandagam like, okay, there is coordination. I attend these meetings and then people come out with certain things. And to say that probably the EU or international organizations.
No, sorry, just 1 minute.
Okay, I'll news. Let him finish.
To emphasize, right? Lambara of money account probably you're gonna understand. And then emphasize the thing is EU is interested in the integration. So I definitely mark your interest towards that. And then you only come together how to coordinate that because Fembali Jile. Man for understanding coming for you. But looking at the broader scheme,
I mean, to be fair though, we are all as human beings, we all want to be rewarded for whatever we're involved in. We don't do anything out of nothing, right? And that's just the reality.
No, listen to me. Yeah, Ebrima. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead. No, bro. Go ahead.
These people are paid to do this. Is that what I say every month?
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
They are on a payroll. Understanding coming for it. So the additional, if they are on a payroll, so engage through our taxpayers' money. Man, for can understand coming for it.
Yes.
So exactly. So most of them actually, they only involved in this because they knew near GB from. There's certain times I get very pissed. I wouldn't want to call names because but there are certain times that I call Paragon and interrogated him. I said, hey, look, I don't think this particular guy should be here. The right person to be here is you, despite your difference in terms of services. Man of can understand and coming for it. That is what I am talking about. And Paragon knew this. There are certain places where so part of the so-called coordinator, because another and on top of that, every month. So the integration assistance program, so how about funding they aspire to migrate and then the ability to Qatar, they become redundant. How do we help those people?
Thank you so much.
It's because you are not investing on that. You be invest condemning, I'll be coordination coordination. That's not
I think we can allow allow this to slide so that there will be no back and forth because
Yes.
MLA Ate Daminki Malafika Jebula, even though he does not have any facts or whatsoever, for like baby Volkatawal. I'm just trying to tell you what the EU is interested, what the Gambia government is also interested in. We work on that. Recently, we implemented program. NEDI is implementing program. NYSS is implementing joint apprenticeship program, the graduate scheme. GSI is doing horticulture. All those ones are things that are actually going on, not necessarily integration process. Things are actually happening. Probably Nibi Gefaneka Filikola. And I'm coming for just trying to play on the other. I agree in certain aspect. But I can't go Dalta Fende Bali, Odiam Siva boy. Kota Kel Bukata. Alpha letter outline, I'm a Mulkataji. Fende Benji. I'm a Kujamale Fudidal. But we actually trying our best. I know that best is not even enough. If I want to put it there is no government that is popular. And the most difficult thing is to defend a government. And I cannot do that. And I will not do that. I work for the young people. I see the problems every day. There is a lot that need to be done. But it will be very unfair for you to say there is no coordination. I am telling you, I'm inside. I'm giving you evidence, the thematic working group, meetings that are attended without the intervention of UN agencies, things that are happening at NYC, at National Enterprise Development Initiative, at NYSS, and other ministries that are running the Roots project, the Giraffe projects, even though I have a problem in terms of their implementation. But it will be very unfair for you to sit at your comfort zone. So we allow that to slide. No move.
Mustafa,
it is what it is. Yeah.
Mustafa, and during your earlier conversation, you did mention, in fact, in your response to Dibba, is that there are coordination happening, but the implementation bit of it and how holistically effective that is still remains, there's much to be desired in that regard. I do want you to talk about the tangibles, right? Talk to us about what do you think could be improved in terms of implementation from your vantage position where you work right now, because that is important. One, but two, also areas of prioritization in terms of investment by the government of the Gambia to provide opportunities for young people at a much more systemic scale, at a much more larger scale for young Gambians to really access these opportunities back home that would deal with, at least partly deal with the issue of migration in the country. If you would really talk very briefly about that, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. So in terms of statistic, it is a little bit problematic where you have like 75% of the population below the ages of 35 and around 33% who are the young people, 33% that is between the ages of 15 and then 35. What could have been done properly? I don't believe in a lot of this chit-chat workshop or training, even though they are very much important because this is where discussions happen and then you scale it in terms of consultation. That Muhammad said there was no consultation prior to the development of the policy. I will allow that to slide. But for me, where I look at is the issue of agreement, because the Spain-Gambian bilateral agreement should open everybody's eyes. What are our young people going to do in Spain? Picking fruits. Can't we have gardens in this country? Gambia has one of the most fertile soil in sub-Saharan Africa. The soil is so flat, we have fresh water. We could have used this. Young people are involved in gardening. If government sponsor them with boreholes and then fence, a lot of these young people are ready to enter into agriculture market. Entrepreneurship training, a lot of people get this training, but startup fund is actually very difficult. If, for example, NEDI open up application and say, we need like 50 people to apply for a grant of 100,000, you will receive 5,000 people. When the Spain-Gambia bilateral agreement needed like 30 people, more than 2,000 people turn up at the Gambia Labor Department to access that form. And then some of them actually have to scale the fence. That story is something there. What happened there is no secret to everybody, even though I don't have a lot of problem with Spain bilateral agreement, but it should taught us, the government, a lesson that, hey, come on, we are sending these people out down there, not for high-skilled job, but low-skilled job. Is it not possible for us to have farms in this country? Is it not possible for government to dig boreholes? Is it not possible for government to connect pipes in the river, sponsor private entities, so that we have people who pick the fruits in this country rather than you sending people down there? And what happened is actually all there. It actually failed, and it failed because of us, the Gambians. You have your people go there, out of 30 people, 33 people, only 3 people came back. 4 people claim that they missed their flight. 27 of them are languishing in Spain. And that is actually bad. You don't need to support a policy simply because you like the government or you hate the government. It is actually for the Gambians. It has to stay. Whether the policy is there or it's not there, Gambian will be taken back. So even whereas the policy is taking 50% to Spain is actually a good start, even though I have an issue with it because Europeans don't do anything for free. The moment they bring 50 in people, that open floodgates for deportation because that's what happened. Okay, now we are creating regular pathways. We have taken 35 people, 70 people to Spain. So therefore, when deportation comes, come on, government fana be tight like because ni moka domandin dila na meta fana mboka fasino ma. But even to actually bring the issue of deportation lafta ka je for the domandin because you have a lot of misconception mulba for la change letter jana ila change letter ya sign would bantaba diamo is not go work in migration. Even in the EU, the citizens will think that the government they will deport these people. They think that deportation is easy. The EU citizens, I mean, because to them deportation is like putting people on the flight and then taking them. They don't know that deportation is a political process. But here too, the politicians are afraid to talk about deportation because the oppositions will go around obviously and say deportation on stop deportation on stop, something happens. Look at what happens in US. Gambia Bulandi Jabe. What happens there? Not because of the government, but because of the citizens, how we behave, how we encourage our people to overstay, how we encourage them not to come back. It hurts you. It hurts policies. Even when this government comes and then leave, another government will come. And I can tell you that no government will ever go out to say, we are not taking deportation. The world is a global village. Like you take some. In the Gambia, Mol Canal every time. The only time Mojamal can Mira, Molbina can is when a chartered flight actually comes in. But the skill set, like making no empower. Sama doing there is a lot of money in it. UNDP that train with a lot of young women who train smart agriculture, and I think that is a game changer. The Minister of Agriculture should do a lot of things. We visited their farms in June and then other place. You will be sad. 5 hectares are burning Yamol on Boholo Bije. So sometimes you get mad. What is happening here? There is water here, there is garden here, but there is nothing actually happening. So I think the Minister of Agriculture needs to do a lot. They have a lot of grants, the giraffe, the roots, but sometimes it's disheartening. What is actually happening? Unless and until we understand that the young people, in order to address the root cause of migration, the European Union is not very much interested. They are only interested in deterrence. Kamul push number. When they come here, it is our responsibility to reintegrate our people, provide the enabling environment, but as well as people in migration scholars to communicate factual information. We can all do this using this platform. You will be level, but for Tonya, what's a forek? Yeah.
Dibba, last question on this subject before I let each of you to conclude, because I mean it's a little over 1.5 hours. It's been absolutely incredible talking to both of you and your knowledge of the issue. I think I made the right call to say, hey, I need my 2 brothers to come and chat with me. But this has been very educative for me, and I hope it has been for a lot of people too. But Dibba, I really wanted to ask you this. Recently, we've also seen the Gambian government sign some form of deal or agreement with Gambians that let a couple of Gambians or some Gambians go to some countries, including, I think, Saudi Arabia, for some job opportunities somewhere. And we know that we've also seen individuals take some trip to Spain, and these individuals are paid pittances. It's not unrealistic to understand that you are not going to pay these individuals that you are bringing from Gambia to Europe or to Saudi Arabia or elsewhere to come and work for these individuals. They're literally in servitude, as you talked about earlier. They are being exploited for their labor. And eventually these Gambians want to come home. In fact, I've seen reports of Gambians making audios begging the government of the Gambia to return them to the Gambia. But there is much being done about it. Why do you think a government who should be very much invested in keeping its people home, especially for countries that have a record of dehumanizing our people in some of those roles that they disguise as job opportunities for our people, make sure that they are taking people to places where they have jobs that will really impact and improve their lives, not to put them in some sort of servitude role? Why do you think the government of the Gambia really takes?
So to speak, but it's only a useless government that will mortgage its citizens to other countries for them to go and work. We have a lot of space, and freedom of choice in the Gambia in different sectors of the economy where young people could contribute. It's just about creating the level playing field. We have all seen the human rights violations method against, our girls, mostly. who go to Saudi and then these Arabian countries. And then also looking back in Spain, like Paragon said, they go and do low skills job. But, Paragon literally answered my question. Lack of coordination among the agencies responsible for migrations. That's what leads to all these things. Yes, agricultural ministry have a lot of projects, right? But it is the responsibility of those in charge of the coordination of migrations and the institutions responsible to work with these sectors to ensure that young people are engaged rather than taking the irregular migration route or being ready to sacrifice their life to go to Saudi Arabia or other countries in the Gulf to work. All right. And another thing is, yes, he also mentioned that we have the National Youth Service Scheme, we have NADI, and so on and so forth, all these institutions trying to train young people. The question is, are these trainings providing direct employment for young people? If yes, what are the statistics? If yes, why do we have rising youth unemployment in the Gambia? So that comes to say, we don't have resilience in our job market. The World Bank have projected that over 222 billion people will need jobs by the end of this decade, right? Only 400 million young people, would be available to work. So what happens to the rest of the young people? And this includes the Gambia, where we have about 45 to 50% of young people who are out of jobs, right, or are underemployed. So therefore, the ministries responsible or departments responsible for creating jobs and social protection systems need to sit down again, rethink, engage people, and ensure that trainings does not only be a mere capacity building, but create direct employment for young people, whatever that would be, whether they will go and work in institutions, after their National Youth Service Scheme services, or whether they will be entrepreneurs of their own, and contribute to the local economy. So for me, why the consultations are not done, and I still hold a strong opinion that there is no coordination, except if their interests are there, and I was able to justify that here, that at times I myself will call Paragon or certain individual to say, hey, what is this person doing here? Because this is strictly about immigration issue. And before you know it, these people are already focused on, enriching themselves, and at the end of the day, leaving the mass exodus of young people in poverty, the world in, so taking young people to Spain doesn't benefit us anyways, in anything. So, it's clearly visible. In fact, if you look at the agreement, it has not taken due process because it has to go through the National Assembly. Public opinion should be, should strictly be considered. Public opinion should strictly be considered, and there should be mechanisms in place to ensure that these young people do not dodge. How can a whole government come to us and say, we are taking these people to Spain, and they eventually dodge? Are you okay? Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
And then imagine, how can you take young people to Saudi Arabia or in the Gulf to go and work, do basic menial jobs, and they are paid 2,000, and you expect them to have their feeding, their clothing, and live a dignified life? Like, Gambia government doesn't do their needs-based assessment to understand what exactly the kind of jobs, in fact, these young people will need. So out of desperation, they also want to leave. Only when they are met with challenges and difficulties, they wanted to come back. Like you were out, Paragon, I was saying, like most of these trainings from the National Youth Service Scheme to NADI are not creating direct employments. Like if they are creating direct employments, we need to know the statistics. Right, and that is very important for us to communicate.
I heard you loud and clear. I heard you.
Yeah, training should not only be soft skills, but it's also be. You've been in Germany, right? And I live in Switzerland. We believe in what we call Ausbildung, and everybody that have gone through these trainings in European countries, whether you are a foreigner who have met the criteria of being either a citizen or a legal resident, these trainings lead you to jobs straight away. It doesn't matter whether you're going to work as a waiter, whether you're going to work as a gardener or whatever, or in logistics and so on and so forth. So we should also try, because most of the jobs or trainings that we do in the Gambia are so abstract, and it's not in tandem with modern skill development in the 21st century. Ebrima, you live in Seattle. It's a highly skilled community.
Yeah, it is.
Right? It's a highly skilled community. And then soft skills no longer work. Like, even if you have mastery of all these definitions about immigrations and so on and so forth, for instance, right? Or in law and so on and so forth, you should be able to have basic skills to demonstrate that, because sometimes you need to, let's say basics, like you need graphics designs to be able to do certain things, So Gambia, we need to revisit our curriculums.
Yes, and Dibba, to put emphasis on that, Hanijang, like if you come here, even And this is going to sound very controversial. Some of the degrees that we're doing, they are not fit for purpose in a lot of Western societies where you want to go. You know, Nina, if you do certain
I
programs,
agree.
Nina, Nanjang, bro, you
So
have to spend additional 2, 3, or 4 years to go to school to acquire some skill. We all know this. So I agree with Diba. Now, education system, not only in terms of skill set or different skill programs that we have, but also fundamentally our education system and curriculum needs to be revisited to bring it in tandem with the 21st century realities of many developed countries, especially with the imagining AI that we have today. So STEM education must be prioritized. If you're thinking about not only irregular migration, but even regular migration, you just want to transition to go to Europe or America. These countries are getting to a place where they're not interested in just individuals that are going to provide cheap labor. They're very invested in having people who are skilled in specialized areas, and it will be easier for you to integrate in these societies and have rewarding jobs that will make you economically viable or sustainable for a long time. But Mustafa, finally, what do you think really should be the priority of the National Youth Council at this stage, and also in tandem with its broader governmental institution, I mean government apparatus, in providing opportunities for young Gambians back home? Because the reality is migration is not going to stop. People are going to continue to want to leave the country even if we have everything. But ours is so sad because there is not so much for young people in terms of opportunities back home. You look at the recent budget allocation for 2026, what has been allocated for the youth and sports, or generally the youths of the country, is very minimal. And it begs the question, how would this provide or cater to the needs of Gambians? Um, and so I was just curious now to for you to really wrap the conversation up with what could be done to cater to the youths of the Gambia who, as we know, are struggling. You know, people are struggling a lot in that country. There is no job. Just yesterday, I mean, a few days ago, a young girl was stabbed to death at her workplace, and those are all underbellies of the lack of employment and other social protection. People are desperate, and that's going to continue to happen unless the government, like you said, which have the the responsibility to provide for its people, rest squarely on the government of the Gambia. There is no excuse about that, and we cannot mince those words. It's the government's responsibility to ensure Gambians have jobs, Gambians live in a well and dignified life back home. So, if you would wrap the conversation up with really what are some of those considerations, what they should be.
So thank you so much, Ibrahim, and then thank you so much, Diba. I quite agree with so many points that he raised, especially with regard to skills. He talked about wood building. You know, he who knows it feels it, and I also complain of the same thing. But like what the government could actually do, or the National Youth Council where I work, we are the policy arm of the government that represent the young people in this country and then communicate the problems of the young people to the minister, who in turn advises the president during their cabinet meetings. Unemployment is around, what they put as unemployment according to ILO is around 3%. But again, when you put people who are out of skills and everything, you realize that about 47% of the young people are out of work. And then this actually created a repercussion on a high, because when we went to Gunjur, one man was like busy Baliam and Betia. And then you think that he is talking nonsense, but that's the reality. It encourages people to be very idle, a lot of criminality. Obviously, if people don't have money and they see an opportunity to get money, obviously they will get in there, either Babuna Kidola or whatsoever, and then they will collect it. The other part of it, me along more demanding, is the issue of this immigration issue. Like it happens only in Europe, anti-immigrant sentiment. It is actually happening in this country where we treat foreigners as criminals, foreigners as drug lord, foreigners as prostitute. It's the same way Donald Trump and then Europe and all these people are criminals. But Ntolka is very normal, even whereas just one foreigner actually kills a Gambian, we'll start talking. Will foreigner be more far Kanjani? When you check the statistics, you realize that it's just framing. But what the government actually needs to do is to educate its citizenry on skills. And I mean, I agree totally. When you have skills, not mismatched skills, they cannot even know how to apply it. Our roads, we need engineers. When you go to Farababanda campus, most of the laborers are either Gambians or Sierra Leoneans. You don't have Gambians who are real architects working on our Gambian university. The university itself is given by Sapoji Pananji, an Indian company. They build our National Assembly. Our roads too, Senegalese are actually coming. But when we train people with those skills, they can later allow that you will survive. You go to America, you will survive. But if you go to America, you will not be able to survive because we are used to hammer and nail. They are no more using hammer and nail. They are using screws and then other things. If fetal fan and the same thing, you go to our fetal garage, you need a motor fan, motor na engine or you come, you get sad, and then yaba means somebody because the moment a vehicle get there, no diagnostics. So I think those are the skills that the 21st century need, skills in cooking, but people are making it. So like model skill, kind of like the amounts of training that are going on. I agree with Dibba, the amounts of training, but we need hands-on experience to make sure that we move this country. And I will emphasize, especially on agriculture. If people understand agriculture, those who go to the University of the Gambia, don't just be reading theory, go to the practical. Faraba has a very big land, Alta Jali Bambel Doku, so that we have that food self-sufficiency. Take them to Jahali Pacha, let them examine the soil and understand what type of rice will work there. Japan does it, China did it. Why is it that we have a lot of young Gambians do it? Unless the government, the private sector, the opposition, all of us concentrate and not politicize everything, because right now it can be politicized. Or else, come on, this country is not moving. A lot of young people are ready to leave. Every time you cannot even stop them. People will go, but the government needs to do its best to make sure that the young people that are here live a dignified life. No young person wants to live. Now, everything is okay. You want to come back here and then do your podcast here. You have your big garden, you are living rather than employee. But we all facing it. Even if I face the heat, man, I face it. I'm not actually I'm enjoying, no, but I believe I have to manage my life. But the government, the duty bearers, ourselves from our homes, we have a responsibility towards this country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dibba.
Well, I will start from anti-immigration sentiments back home. I think there's no populist more than Barrow, Jami, and Sadara Karawajawara. There's no far right more than these three presidents that we had. Basically, looking at those who were living in Burfoot, Ghana town, some of them were here since colonial days. Most of them were born and raised in the Gambia. They have their kids and their grandkids. We could not even give them a mayor ID card, right? And we cannot even give them our passport, which is very sad, right? And now we want to politicize them because elections are coming. So it's the same jobs that we throw at the Europeans and Americans. It's the same thing we were facing here. I remember one guy, Kemben Tar, used to work at the Ministry of Justice. I think he was heading one of the departments, so I think he led one of the prosecutions in the Gambia. In fact, very fair and adequately. But because he is from Cameroon, actually, and African citizens, we have dispensed a lot of anti-immigration rhetorics against him, to our own African brother. So I think we should be in considerations as well, the way we treat others. Yeah. And recently, I have a report that a citizen of Guinea-Conakry, actually one of our neighboring countries, with a valid laissez passer, was even arrested and taken to Brikama immigration post. And he's
Well, Dibba is gone for some reason. But Mustafa, finally, what's your call for hope? And then we can wrap this up. Hopefully, if Dibba comes, we'll just finish it. But okay, he's back on. Let me just quickly add him on.
Dibba, yes. Sweden is network.
No, sorry about that. So Ibayako, his time was actually so wasted, and then that's a serious issue. So we also have to look at inward and see how best we treat immigrants. That is very, very imperative. So another thing I'd love to mention is that Paragon is an advisor to the government, basically. So let us ensure that there is effective and adequate coordination. I still believe that there is no coordination, but also let's work towards that so that we will be able. But also, it's not only about university education, right? Because we have national youth service schemes. National youth service schemes everywhere in the world should be ready to provide adequate workforce for its countries, for its citizens. So we must be able to look into that and see how best we can intractably address that. So it's a shame, like when we as Gambians would always sit and talk about our problems, but now we also have to look into solutions and how this is part of a broader scheme of consolidating our democracy so that people can live in dignity and in comfort, so that people would be willing to, all of us have contributed our quota in national development in many ways, right? And then you could see all of us sending remittances at home, but sending remittances at home, in fact, is by choice. It's not by choice, it's in fact by force. So I wouldn't see that in a broader scheme of contributing to national development. It's because the remittances you send, you don't give it directly to the country. You're trying to help your families, right? But even afar, Ibrahim is trying to understand that. Yes, look, I just need to enlighten people. I just need to make sure that citizens have the platform to discuss about the intractable challenges, and and then their concerns need to be heard, in a broader, larger audience. And then he came up with it. There is no better national development initiative than this. So these are some of the things we need to encourage, and I think governments should be able to open up a grant so that Ibrahim could teach at least young people how to do podcasts so that they could also monetize their accounts and be able, I mean, you need to support that, So even at a far, we need to support people in the diaspora.
Anyway, brothers, I'll mock in there. I just finally want to give each of you, in 30 seconds, an opportunity to tell us what is your call for hope. What keeps you up, very engaged about Gambia? Because again, like I always, there's a lot of people that have made a conscious decision to stay completely away from whatever is happening back home or what is affecting our people. But all of us have made it a duty to add our voice to various issues that need change about our country. And so for that, I wish to commend both of you for your availability and also for your consistency in being very courageous to speak about issues, especially for Mustafa, who works for the Gambian government and still has the ability to hold on to his voice, to criticize what is happening, but also comment. Where there is good, let's talk about it. But also where there are shortfalls, we must be able to say that, hey, we need to improve on these areas. And we are not haters of government. I genuinely want this government to succeed. All of us want this government to succeed, and that's why we're so hyperly obsessed about the idea of a progressive government. But what is your call for hope? What keeps you up a lot? What energizes you to keep doing what you do? And every day you wake up, you're like, yeah, I want to go again today, the next day, the day after that, for the rest of your life.
Yeah, Ibrahim, thank you so much. For me, what keeps me awake and then what actually drawn me back to the country. Come on, I have a family. And every time I wake up early in the morning, I see Zainab and then Mujahid. I realize that, come on, this country needs to change because they cannot go through the struggle that I went through. That cannot be possible. We need to change this country. Even whereas I travel to Europe or America, I can never be an American. I will always belong to the Gambia. No matter what happens, I cannot remove the Gambia from myself, even whereas Gambia is a failed state. This is where we belong, and that's why I am always motivated to do what I can do, even though it is very little, and you believe that you cannot make changes. But change starts from little, and the little that we do actually create impact. And for me, the little information that I pass to these irregular immigrant returnees, and they smile and then they praise me, only that is actually fulfilling. The mere fact that I can speak and then people listen and then understand that things need to happen, even whereas there is a glimmer of hope. But I believe that this country can move with the right mindset. And then with this type of conversation, I believe we can do it. And thanks so much for the invitation. Rest assured, I will always grace the invitation when there is time. Thank you so much. And then Dibba too, keep it up. We will not agree always. We will disagree. But after all, we all need the best for our country. And I want you to keep it up, keep criticizing, keep pounding. But make sure when you are pounding, pound on the right buttons. Because if you touch the wrong buttons, we will come back.
Yes, Diba.
Yes, Mustafa's reasons are very valid, and that really touches my heart. Like, he consolidated this to a family. Like, he wants to see a country where his kids would grow, where they could live in dignity and in freedom, where they could have endless choices and possibilities. These have really touched my heart. Basically, for me, I think what keeps me going the most is that. What keeps me going the most, to be honest with you, I just want to wake up every day and see young people thrive in the Gambia, thrive in all sectors of the economy. So that is why I'm also trying to see what I can possibly do from afar, right, to help government at least to address some of these structural issues. That is why I try to put in something together, which will come up very soon, basically. And I'm not trying to look for funds from the government. Actually, it'll come from for self-funding, but also I'll look at somewhere else where I can partner to come and support the government wherever I can. I don't even need letters of endorsements from them. Let them just acknowledge that we exist, and then we work together to address this. Because it's one thing to criticize, but it's another thing also to complement the efforts of the government. And I think the Gambia government is trying its best, but the best are not in fact enough. So yeah, we're going to keep on the conversation, and then thank you very much for trusting us and for bringing us to have this very important conversation. Actually, Paragon, more
Thank
can.
you both. Thank you both, everybody. Thank you all to our guests. To our audience who are here, who have been with us since the beginning of this conversation, and I really and sincerely appreciate all of you. It's been an incredibly enlightening conversation, and I've learned very much, and I hope our audiences have as well. Thank you very much, Mustapha Sonko, who works at the National Youth Council in the Gambia, and Muhammed Lamin Dibba, who is also a migration specialist based in Switzerland. And these are brothers that I've had the pleasure of knowing for nearly a decade. We all went to University of the Gambia together. Mustafa and I both serve as Secretary Generals of the University of the Gambia Students Union. Diba and I competed in drama competitions when I was in Nusrat High School, and he was in Masrul High School. You know, the second tier to Nusrat High School. Alex would be happy for me to say this, but I'll say it. He went to Masrul High School. I went to Nusrat High School, but he has always been a force to be reckoned with. You know, like he said, we don't always agree, we don't see eye to eye on issues, but I love these brothers genuinely, and when I say that, I mean that. When I say I genuinely mean it when I say I really love conversations like this. I enjoy conversations like this, and it's up to us as young Gambians, as young educated Gambians, to try to hold dialogues like this where we interrogate matters that are both uncomfortable, but they are also the reality of the way of life of our people. So once again, thank you all very much. Thank you for being here. To all of our audiences who are here, please consider subscribing to our YouTube platform, the Dialectic Space Podcast, and support what we're doing. That way, we can continue to bring different audiences to have conversations on a variety of issues. But if any of you also are working on some research subjects or something is happening and you want to come back on, please feel free at any time to let me know and I'll make it happen.
Bye bye.
Au revoir. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.